Being the smartest person in the room has almost nothing to do with being seen as the smartest person in the room. There are people at your company right now who are less capable than you, getting more credit than you, and it's not politics, it's not luck. It's a specific set of habits, and most of them take 3 seconds to fix. Being smart and sounding smart are two completely different skills. Most people spend their whole career assuming the first one automatically produces the second. It doesn't. And this isn't just a personality thing. Researchers have actually measured exactly which habits separate people who read as sharp and credible from people who are just as capable but constantly overlooked. Today I'm walking you through what the research says and exactly what to change, starting with your very next meeting. If you want to become the sharpest, most valued employee at your company, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. This channel is built for people who actually want to grow, and there's a lot more content like this coming. 1. Structure beats vocabulary. Sounding smart at work has almost nothing to do with big words, and everything to do with structure. The people who consistently come across as sharp aren't using more complicated language. They're organizing their thought before they open their mouth, instead of thinking out loud in real time. Here's the fix. Before you speak about anything important, take 3 seconds to mentally structure what you're about to say into a beginning, a point, and a conclusion. Not a script, just 3 seconds. That's the difference between rambling and sounding deliberate. 2. Filler words cost you more than you think. This one is backed by more research than almost anything else in communication science, and the numbers are bigger than most people assume. A Forbes piece on the neuroscience of speech explains that when a listener's brain detects a run of filler words, the amygdala treats it as a mild threat signal, flagging the speaker as uncertain before the listener has even consciously registered why. On top of that, a study published in Memory and Cognition found that and measurably increase the mental effort a listener needs to process what's being said, which hurts how well they retain it. The scale of the effect is bigger than you'd expect. A Cal Poly study had people listen to identical recordings, one with filler words and one without, and rated the fluent version at roughly 6 out of 7 on communication competence versus 4 out of 7 for the version full of fillers. A huge, statistically significant gap for something as small as swapping for silence. And Prepley's research on speech habits found shows up in most people's speech, along with so, like, and you know, which means almost everyone is leaking a little credibility they don't need to. The fix isn't zero fillers. A 2024 study on speech disfluencies found that a low rate, around 5 per minute, didn't hurt perceived effectiveness at all. It's the 12 per minute range that damages you. So the goal isn't perfection, it's noticing the moment before a filler word comes out and replacing it with a half second of silence instead. A pause reads as confidence. A filler reads as hesitation, even when the actual content is identical. 3. Say the point before the reasoning. This is a real framework, not just a personal preference. The US Army actually formalized it decades ago in a regulation called BLUF, bottom line up front. State the conclusion first, then back it up. Most people do the opposite, especially when they're not fully confident. So I was looking at the numbers, and there were a few things that seemed off. And I talked to a couple people, and I think maybe we should look at the budget again. By the time the actual point arrives, the listener has mentally checked out. Compare that to, I think we should revisit the budget. Here's why. Same facts, completely different impression. Executive communication research consistently points to the same reason this works. A listener's attention is highest in the first few seconds of anything they hear. So if your real point is buried at the end of a long wind-up, you've spent their best attention on the least important part of what you said. 4. Handle I don't know like an owner, not a dead end. Saying I don't know and stopping there makes people question your competence, even though not knowing something is completely normal. But Harvard Business School researchers Alison Wood Brooks and Francesca Gino found something counterintuitive. When people ask for help or admit a gap the right way, they're seen as more competent, not less. Researchers call this strategic vulnerability, owning a knowledge gap instead of either hiding it or just shrugging at it. In practice, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll find out and follow up by end of day. Same honest admission, completely different impression because you've paired it with ownership. 5. Ask fewer, sharper questions. Most people avoid asking questions in meetings because they think it'll make them look confused. The data says the opposite. That same Harvard research team found that people who ask more questions, especially follow-up questions, are consistently better liked and seen as more emotionally intelligent, because asking signals genuine engagement, not confusion. The catch is specificity. Can you clarify what success looks like for this by end of quarter? Signals you're thinking about outcomes. A vague, "Wait, what are we doing again?" signals you weren't listening. Same behavior, asking a question, completely different read, depending on how targeted it is. 6. Talk about impact, not tasks. I updated the spreadsheet, sent the emails, and scheduled the meeting is a list. I streamlined our tracking process, which should save the team a few hours a week, is impact. Same work. The second version answers a question nobody asks out loud, but everybody's thinking. Why does this matter? Most people never make that connection explicit, and it quietly costs them over time. Is this manipulation? Worth addressing directly. Faking expertise you don't have is genuinely risky and eventually gets found out. But structuring real competence so it's actually heard isn't manipulation, it's communication. The work still has to be real. This is about making sure it doesn't get lost in the delivery. Body language and pace. Nodding while someone talks, even when you disagree, can unconsciously signal agreement before you've said a word. A neutral, still expression while listening, followed by a calm, clear response, reads as more credible than nodding along and then contradicting yourself seconds later. Pace matters too, and there's real data behind the sweet spot. The National Center for Voice and Speech puts optimal speaking pace around 150–160 words per minute, and a University of Michigan study found comprehension was roughly 22% higher at that pace than above 180 words per minute. Speaking quickly under pressure reads as nervous, even when the content is solid. Slowing down slightly at your key point does the opposite. It signals the point is worth taking time over, and listeners instinctively give it more weight. Credibility in writing, not just meetings. The BLUF principle applies just as much to email. Long, meandering messages that bury the actual ask in paragraph 3 get skimmed or ignored. And it's not a small effect. Nielsen-Norman Group's research on how people read online found that the vast majority of readers scan rather than read word for word. So if the ask isn't near the top, most readers never truly absorb it. "I need your approval on X by Friday," followed by supporting context, gets read properly and taken seriously because you respected the reader's time from the first sentence. Why this compounds? None of these are one-time tricks. It's rarely a single big moment that changes how someone is seen at work. It's dozens of small, consistent signals repeated over time until people start expecting sharp, structured thinking from you before you've even spoken. The recap. Structure your point before you speak. 3 seconds. Beginning, point, conclusion. Replace filler words with silent pauses, not more words. Say the conclusion first, reasoning after. Own what you don't know instead of just admitting it and stopping. Ask specific, forward-looking questions instead of staying silent. Frame your work in terms of impact, not just tasks completed. Slow down slightly at your key points. None of this requires becoming a different person or faking confidence you don't feel. It requires not letting genuinely good thinking get lost in disorganized delivery, because the gap between being smart and sounding smart is smaller and more fixable than most people assume.